We would like to thank you folks for joining our conversation on our advanced planning workshop. We'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to learn about the importance and many benefits of advanced funeral planning. Having these plans in place is a true gift of love that you give your family. And we know as a funeral professionals that when we can pull a file when someone passes away with a complete prearranged funeral, that it makes it so much more manageable for the family than if the family has to come in and start from the very beginning after they've lost a loved one. So before we get started on our advanced funeral planning workshop, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Dianna Budd, and I've actually been doing advanced funeral planning for 30 years. So I like to tell people that I've been doing funeral planning since age 13. And so I've had the wonderful opportunity to help thousands and thousands of people give this wonderful gift of love to their family. And before I started doing advanced funeral planning, I actually was a school teacher by trade. So today, we're going to talk about plans you make today for your families tomorrow is a true gift of love. And people who have their funeral planning in place, they really have given great consideration and they think about their family, because pre-planning does ease a difficult time for your family and makes it far more manageable for them. So in front of you, you do have a folder, and I'm going to go through the folder with you, and I'll have you pull out pages as we go along. So the first page I'd like you to pull out is this page that has notes on it. And this is where, as we're going through the slideshow, you'll want to take some notes. Now remember, I told you I was a school teacher by trade, so I don't want you just to take notes. I want you to take copious notes, because you never know, there could be a test at the end. So the first thing we're going to talk about is proper planning helps to prevent hardship and maximize benefits going directly to your heirs. And in general, that's really what most people want. They usually have some type of life insurances, investments, personal assets, and other benefits, and they really want those to go directly to their beneficiaries. And the way you get that done is by having proper planning in place, because without proper planning, a significant portion of your estate could be lost, because most people will not die without some type of medical expenses. So those have to be attended to. People may have other debts that need to be taken care of. They might have taxes that would be in place, and if you have proper plans in place, you can minimize some taxes being taken out of your estate. There could be fees involved. Again, proper plans in place can minimize some administrative or probate fees. Then if you don't have your cemetery, then the family would have to have that expense. Here's where I'd like to stop a little bit and ask people, how many of you do have your cemetery plans in place already? And that's generally what I find, about half of the people do have your cemetery already taken care of. Then you need your funeral expenses, and not to mention family confusion and conflict can occur if proper plans are not in place. So most generally at this point, then I would get the question from people, then what do I need to have? What you need to have is a complete planning portfolio that includes minimally these things. You need to have a will. Now, not only do you need a will, you need it to be updated. So again, I like to ask everybody, how many of you do have a will? And most generally, when I ask that question, 50% of the people raise their hand and they say, yes, I have a will. But they may have created that will at age 40. So not only do you need a will, you need to make sure you're looking at it and it's updated to continue to do what you want it to do. Now, the will basically then starts to develop the estate plan. All of us have some type of estate. It's just a matter of what we have, how large the estate might be, or exactly what you need. And that's why you need to go to a good attorney, because they will let you know what different things you need to have in place to protect your estate. Then you need a durable power of attorney, and this would be for financial. Now, a lot of times people get nervous about giving anybody durable power of attorney because they don't want someone taking care of their financial decisions when they still can do that themselves. So I tell people, make sure that you do these documents with someone who's a specialist, because if you try to do them online, which you can, if they're not done properly, then there can be some big issues when someone passes away because the documents were not prepared properly. So I tell people, spend the money and get them done right. Start with the attorney, and then he'll let you know what other planning professionals you need to get involved, depending on how big or what type of estate you have. You need a healthcare proxy. The healthcare proxy would include a durable power of attorney for your healthcare. Basically what you're doing is naming an individual that will make health decisions if you cannot do so yourself. Then you need advanced medical directives, which says if this happens, if I get this type of illness, this is what I'd want done. And then you need a living will, which people get confused on that word, living will. What is that? It's basically a document that indicates when the medical profession says that they really can't do anything else, whether you want life support or nutrition. There's two facets to that particular document. Then you need cemetery plans, and we already discussed that a little bit, and 50% of you do have those in place. And you need funeral plans. So today what we're going to do is cover advanced funeral planning as part of your essential life planning, so you have an absolute complete planning portfolio. We're going to talk about the benefits of funeral planning, what are your options, funeral costs. You're going to leave this workshop today, this discussion, knowing exactly how much your funeral may be if you stay with the selections that you're going to actually participate in today. And we'll talk about funding options and benefits. And if you would like to type in questions as we go along, you're most certainly welcome to, and they'll pop up on my screen, and I should be able to answer those if need be. So the value of funeral pre-planning. So in your actual packet, you'll see this, and this is just a pamphlet on why people pre-arrange. I'm going to talk about that, but this you're going to be your take home, and you'll be able to relook at that and go over what I had discussed with you. So the value of pre-planning, it relieves an emotional and financial burden for your family. Like I said earlier, when the funeral director is able to pull a file, then the family is not going to have to make decisions at a very emotional time, and there will never ever be a financial burden if that funeral had been prepaid in advance. It ensures your wishes are known. Now, a lot of times people will have very specific things that they want done for their funeral. So this gives you an opportunity while you're healthy, you can actually record exactly what you want done, or maybe even what you don't want done. So it makes your wishes known. You would have a safe, secure, protected plan that protects your family and estate against any price increases. So once a funeral is planned and prepaid, then the family will never ever have to pay any more out of their pocket on our services and merchandise. And we'll discuss all that a little bit later throughout the presentation. Gives you and your family peace of mind. Back in when this funeral planning started, and it was about in the 1990s when it really started getting some teeth and taking off, Red Book actually did a study, and they were wondering, why are people pre-arranging their funeral? And so they asked a lot of seniors why they were doing their funeral pre-planning, and the number one reason they mentioned was peace of mind. It gave them peace of mind knowing they had it taken care of their family, gave their family peace of mind knowing that it was done. So peace of mind is always the number one reason that people think about doing their own funeral pre-planning. So looking at the reasons that people pre-plan, I would encourage all of you to say which one of those fits you. Why would you do your funeral pre-planning? But the primary reason anybody takes care of their funeral planning is for their family. So now, what do I need to do to complete my burial and funeral pre-planning? Okay, in your folder you'll find this form here, and this is going to list the 4 steps of funeral planning, and we're going to go through that. Now, for those folks who don't have their cemetery planning, I would say that would be a step that you need to make sure that you do include, is to select your cemetery property and decide on how you're going to mark that grave. And then the rest is the 4 steps of funeral pre-planning, which is our specialty, and we're going to talk about, and that's completing your biographical information. You're going to look at the different service options that are available, so make your service selections, make your merchandise selections, and then provide the advance funding. If you do all of those steps on this sheet that you have in your folder, plus have your cemetery property in place, then you can tell your family you have everything taken care of. Okay, so let's just briefly talk about cemetery property and monument and markers. People have to decide, what am I going to do with my human remains? Once I've made that decision, then I need to determine what kind of cemetery space that I need. If I'm doing a casketed burial, then I'm going to need to go to a cemetery and purchase spaces. And then I want to mark that grave with some type of marker and monument. This is an example of some markers and monuments that are available. You can get a grass or flat level marker. Depending if one person is going to be buried, it would be a single marker. If there's 2, it's called a double. Then if you want to raise that marker a little bit, you would get a slant, or sometimes they call it a bevel marker. And again, you can do a single or double. And then most of us know this upright marker, which is kind of your traditional looking marker. So here at our funeral home, we do assist families with their markers and monuments, but we don't do any cemetery spaces. You'll need to go to the cemetery of your choice to make those selections, and we can assist you with that once I work with you one-on-one on our personal consultation. I can give you names of cemeteries that you might be interested in. Okay, now step 1, we're going to talk about complete your biographical information. So I'd like you to pull out this on your folder, and this is an example of a biographical sheet. Okay, the biographical sheet records all your personal information. So the very first flap is all your personal history, all your information, your name, your date of birth, those types of things, which is very important for us to have in place, because that way at the time the family doesn't have to provide all that information, they just have to update it. Then the next side is all your immediate family or your family history. And when you work with your advisor, you're going to fill this out as of today, because this also acts as an emergency record guide. In case the unforeseen happens, then all the information is there. If you live for another 10, 30 years, all the family has to do is update it. They don't have to provide all the 125 pieces of information that are needed and tasks that need to be attended to when someone passes away. It also then on the back will record what type of service you'd like to have, and records all those personal wishes. And you can be as detailed as you want to be. I've worked with people that ladies will tell me what color lipstick they want, you know, what color nail polish they might want to have on. And one of my favorite stories to always tell is when I had about, you know, I told you I started doing this at 13, so I was pretty green, but I was in a lady's home, and she was telling me her personal wishes, and she told me, now this is really important, Diana, you got to get this down, is she wanted to tell me what her bluing formula was. Now listen, I didn't even know what bluing was when I started doing funeral pre-planning, and so I always laugh about that because I wrote the formula down, didn't even know what I was writing down. But the funny thing about Ruth was about every 6 months, I guess your hair changes texture. I didn't know that back then. She would call me on the phone and say, now Diane, I've got to change that formula on my pre-arrangement. So it'd be a little bit different. So we'll write down just about anything, whatever your wishes are. We can most certainly try to get all your wishes in place for you. It's used to complete necessary forms and documents at the time. The funeral director can get a lot of things already started for the family before they come in, because a lot of the information, particularly your personal information, isn't going to change. So we're not asking you to actually fill this out. This is part of our advisor's responsibility. We just give this to you so you know what questions we're going to ask, but most certainly this is part of our service too, to fill this out for you. And it does become your last written communication to your loved ones on really what you want done and what your wishes are for them. So step 2 is service selections. Now, before I talk about what type of service selection or ceremony or celebration of life that you'd like to have, I would be very remiss if I didn't talk about why do we have funeral services. Well, funeral services are for the living. They support the healthy grief process, allows the family to receive support, share memories with their family, friends, and the community. And also eases the transition between life and death. You know, the person who's passed away, they've made the transition, but your family has to now make the transition with going on with their life without you. I always like this allows family and the community to support each other. And I like to use my own mother here. When my mother passed away, she passed away suddenly, but she was 84. And I was very amazed at how many people attended her visitation. So amazed that I took the book home and I counted how many people was there for visitation for an 84-year-old lady. And there was well over 350 people. And the stories they shared with us, we didn't even know how important she was to the community. She would support everybody's garage sales, and they said they really appreciated her doing that. And then she had a beautiful garden, and she always put flowers out on her porch, and how people would love to go by every spring and summer and look at her flowers. So we didn't even realize what an impact she had made on the community. And that's something that the community can do. They can come to the funeral home and support that family. So that, to me, is the real value of us having visitations and viewing. It's not only for our family, but for the community. But the primary reason that we do funerals is for these people, and that's our family. So I want to talk about the components of a meaningful funeral, memorial, or celebration of life. Basically, there's 5 components. The first is most of the time the family will meet privately before they receive any guests that come to a public visitation. Then, after the family has been able to have their private time, then they'll have a visitation for the public. After that, then usually the next day or sometimes even the same day, they'll have a funeral ceremony, celebration of life. You know, nowadays we use a lot of different terminology for that, but it's really for us to honor that individual and celebrate, you know, their legacy or how much they meant to us. And then most people will determine what they're going to do with their human remains and have a permanent final disposition or a place to place those remains, whether it's casketed burial or we're burying cremated remains. And then afterwards, it's nice for the family to gather again, to break bread together, which we a lot of times know as a bereavement dinner. A lot of times now they're calling them celebration dinners, those types of things. Now those are really the 5 components. You may decide to do all 5 of them. You may decide to just do 2 of them, but it's really your choice on what you want to do. But funeral services, celebrations of life are really done for these people no matter what they look like. Now nowadays, they may not ever look up from their computer. However, you know, when they lose you or a loved one, they're gonna put these things down. I can guarantee you that. So let's talk about what funeral service selections are available if you want to do a casketed burial. Now, before I get into that, I'm going to need for you to pull out this form here. This is our general price list. It's simply a menu of all the services that we have to offer for our families. And I'm going to go over those with you, but you need to see that. So everybody pull that out. Okay, So what are your choices? Full traditional funeral is when you have a visitation and a viewing. And the funeral industry has kind of been our own worst enemy on this, because we've used viewing and visitation as the same thing. But nowadays we should really divide that up, because viewing means when you go there and they say they're having a viewing, you actually are going to view someone in a casket. Okay, and that's what a full traditional funeral is. And then the next day we'll have a funeral service, and then we will go to the graveside for a graveside service or committal service. People know those two different terms. Now, if you did what I just talked about and you want to do it all on the same day, it's called a same day traditional funeral. You're going to do the visitation, viewing, the service, and go to the graveside all in one day. That's called a same day traditional funeral. Then sometimes people decide on, they're just going to have maybe a private viewing for the family. The family's just going to do that private viewing, and then the public will just go to the graveside service. Now, all these options are with casketed burial. Now let's talk about cremation service offerings. Okay, if you decide that what you want to do with your remains is you want to be cremated, you still can have a full service cremation, which is basically visitation and viewing. You're going to actually view the person in a casket. You're going to have a funeral service, and instead of going to the graveside, we're going to take your loved one, or we're going to take you, because I'm talking about you. We're going to take you to the crematory. And at a later date, the family will decide what they're doing with the cremated remains. If they're burying them, we're going to privately meet them out the cemetery and bury those cremated remains. That's called a full service cremation. It looks and feels like a full traditional funeral, except we're not going to proceed to the graveside. We're going to dismiss people, usually to that bereavement dinner, if you will, or celebration of life dinner, and then we will take the loved one to the crematory. Then a memorial service, you can have the urn present, or you don't have to. Now, the word memorial, when you see that word, that means that you are not going, if you see in the paper they're having a memorial service, you are not going to go into that church or into the funeral home and view someone in a casket. By the mere fact of the word memorial, there will be no viewing of a human body in a casket. So that's what a memorial service is. If you would like to have a public graveside to bury your cremated remains, then we're going to have the urn present so that we can proceed on to the graveside from there. Then the next is a direct cremation. Now, direct cremation is when basically someone has decided they're not going to do any kind of gathering, visitation for their family. It's just going to be a direct cremation, and then at some point they're going to tell us what we're going to do with those cremated remains, and whether they're going to bury them, whether the family's going to keep them, or whether they're going to scatter them. That's direct cremation. Okay, now in your folder you see there's an estimate sheet. Okay, if you want to do a casketed burial, you're going to use the estimate that says sheet that says funeral estimate. If you want to do cremation, you're going to use the one that says cremation option. So everyone should basically have kind of thought about it and know whether they're doing casketed burial or they're going to do cremation. So just pull out the form that relates to you. Okay. Now, when you're talking about a funeral cost estimate, there are basically three areas that are included in pricing a funeral. There's the professional service fees, or the service fees. Then you're going to have merchandise, and for people who want casketed burial, it would be a casket and then an outer burial container, which most people know the word vault. And I'm going to kind of explain the difference between a vault and a concrete box. Then there's a whole nother area here which is called the cash advance items, or if you will, the third-party courtesy items, that the funeral home actually purchases these services from an outside vendor, if you will. But they're a very important part of a funeral estimate, so you can make sure you have paid for everything when you set up your irrevocable funeral trust. Okay? So now let's get to a little work on what is included if people want a full traditional funeral, okay? Now, I'd like you to take the general price list, and I have highlighted here full traditional funeral. Okay, the full traditional funeral service fee, the dollar amount that you're going to pay for, and in this case is $4,900, would include the basic services of the funeral director and staff. The easiest way I explain that to people is that's the cost of us having a funeral home. That's our overhead. And then it includes embalming because you're having public visitation. It's not a state law that you have to have embalming, but we, the funeral home, require it because you're having the public coming in. Then it includes other preparations such as cosmetology, dressing, and casketing. And of course, if you want bluing in your hair, it will include that too. It includes the use of our facility and staff for viewing and visitation, use of the facility and staff for the funeral service in our chapel or any other location. We don't really charge extra if we have to go to the church. Some funeral homes do, so you'll need to make sure you know if your funeral home does charge a little extra for that. We don't. My funeral home does not. Use of the following automobile equipment. We use a vehicle to transfer the loved one into our care, so it's transfer of remains to the funeral home. It includes the hearse or the funeral coach to do the procession to the graveside, and the utility vehicle is what we use to run all errands and do whatever we need to for the family, to take flowers wherever they need to be, pick up and run errands for the family. So all of those things are included in what's called the service fees. Okay, so now it's time to choose. Okay, now on your estimate sheet, whether you're doing cremation or whether you're doing, you know, the full traditional, I need for you to have something in this very top line. Okay, so if you're doing full traditional, remember I said it was $4,900, but in this case it's $4,998. If you want to do everything we talked about all in the same day, it's $4,598. If you're going to do graveside service only and you're not going to have any embalming because no one's going to be viewing you, then it's $3,658. If you're doing a full traditional cremation, it's $4,998. Now that seems a little high, people will say, but that includes the actual viewing casket that you're going to be viewed in. Then the memorial service, which includes the cremation fee, is $3,103. The direct cremation includes the cremation fee, and we can't just take you to the crematory, you know, just as you are. We have to put you in a cardboard box that's required, and that's included, and it's $2,708. So knowing those service charges, what type of ceremony or service you want to have, everybody should have something on their first line. Okay? Now the next thing we're going to talk about is merchandise. So for those folks who want to have casketed burial, in your folder there is our casket price list. It's simply a menu of all the caskets that we have on our floor or we have to offer. It's our general price list for caskets, which you have to see. Then also you will need to select an outer barrel container, and this is, I want you to pull out the general price list for the outer barrel container. There are two types of outer barrel containers. There's a grave liner or there's a vault. If you're going to bury your cremated remains, a lot of cemeteries now require an urn vault. And then you can, of course, do all kind of other personalized materials, and that are available. But let's first talk about those caskets, okay? On the general price list of our caskets, you can see that we have caskets that range in price, and I don't want you to fall off your chair here or fall somewhere off your chair. Caskets range in price from $14,500 to $2,150. That is a very, very large price range. However, caskets are only made out of two types of materials, some type of metal or some type of wood. Now, the type of metal that is used will determine the price. So when the casket companies use bronze or copper, for for a casket, you can see on your price list, those are the most expensive. That's the $14,500 is the bronze casket. They're naturally non-rusting, they're very durable, and they are the most expensive metals used in casket construction. Okay, this is just an example of a bronze casket. Next in price point, then will come your stainless steel. Stainless steel is rust-resistant material. It's a man-made material, and it's available in 2 different grades of stainless steel. If you have a premium grade, it's going to be more expensive because it has nickel in it and it's more durable. If you use the basic grade, it just has chromium in it and it's really not as durable. And I always like to relate to women. You know, when we first got married, we want to have those really nice silverware that was thick, because those were the premium stainless steel. Same thing with pots and pans. And so it's the very same thing in casket construction. The more expensive that material, the more expensive that casket's going to be. Okay, this is an example of a stainless steel casket. Then the other metal caskets are your carbon steel caskets. When you use carbon steel in casket construction, you're basically determining how thick the sheets of metal are that is used in the casket construction. The thicker those sheets of metal, the more expensive that casket's going to be. So an 18 gauge is thicker than a 20 gauge, which is the thinnest metal sheets that are used in casket construction. I tell the women it's just backwards. The higher the number, the thinner. And this is just an example of an 18 gauge casket. Now, some people really like hardwood caskets, and hardwood caskets are priced according to what type of species of wood that is used. Hardwood caskets are unmatched with warmth and beauty. They're handcrafted like fine furniture. They have very unique grading patterns, and they're available in a variety of types and species. The more expensive that wood, like mahogany, is more expensive than cherry. Next in price point would become walnut. Next is oak, pecan, and poplar. Now what I find is either people who really love wood will usually pick a wood casket, or if they're farmers, a lot of time farmers really like the wood caskets. Matter of fact, my husband, his funeral is all prearranged, and he really loves oak. So of course, you know, we have selected an oak casket for him. And this is just an example of your middle price range wood casket, and that would be the poplars, are really the middle. Now, outer barrel containers, if you will. This is our general price list for outer barrel containers. They are designed to protect the integrity of the grave space. It's not a state law that you have to have an outer barrel container. However, it's a cemetery requirement. And most cemeteries do require it, unless it's a family-owned cemetery or a very small church cemetery, they may not. But nowadays they do. There are 2 types of outer barrel containers. There's a grave liner, which protects the grave space, the integrity of that grave space, so it doesn't cave in. And then there are what's called vaults. Vaults protect the grave space and the casket within. I tell people a picture is worth 1,000 words. So for example, it used to be that they did not require that you put the casket in anything. That's when they dug graves by hand. Now we use heavy machinery, so there's a lot of pressure that's placed on the adjacent graves when we open the middle grave. So the cemeteries, in order to keep the monuments from caving in and to keep from having cemeteries that look like this, they now require minimally that you have at least a concrete box. A concrete box will not protect that casket from getting any outside elements in. So that shows you a picture there. If you want to protect that casket, you have to get a vault. Okay, now, so that's something you have to decide. Do you want a vault, or is a concrete box sufficient for you? Now, if you decide you want a vault, there are different levels of strengths of vaults. If you have one liner in a vault, which keeps any moisture getting through the concrete, then that is called your basic or your single reinforced, and those you have your price list. On the single reinforced, those will range from $1,450 to $1,750. If you want to have a stronger vault, you're going to have 2 liners. Those are called double reinforced, and those range anywhere from $3,950 to the $2,300. The cost is determined by what the secondary liner is, what type of metal is. Just like with a casket, if I put stainless steel in a vault, it's going to be it's going to be not quite as expensive if I did bronze or copper, because bronze and copper is more expensive. Okay, any questions on the vaults or anything? So that gives you an idea. My main objective on outer barrel containers is you know the difference between a vault and a concrete box, so you know what you're purchasing. So now it's time to choose. Okay, this is where they would go in the selection room. Okay, and so what I would like you to do is, all of you have in front of you, you have pictures of caskets, and you also have pictures of vaults. We're just going to take a few minutes for you to decide to put something, to decide what kind of price range you want, and then put that down on your price list. Okay, that'll give you some idea. So you should have a casket selection if you're doing casketed burial, and you should have either your concrete box, or you should have some kind of vault. Now, also on your sheet, there's a place that says memorial package. What a memorial package includes is your personal memorial folders, your registration book, your thank you notes, and a lot of our funeral home includes your DVD and your bookmarks and a memorial candle. All of that is included, and you guys are going to drop in your price of $160 for those. Okay, now we're not going to complicate things. The whole next section is all those outside expenses. I'm going to tell you what they are, and I want you just to drop the prices in because they are needed. Okay, if you already have your marker out at your cemetery space, or you're planning on getting that, the monument will always include your inscription for your name, your date of birth, but they're not going to put your final date on there, or we'll have to come and get you. So that always goes on your pre-arrangement to make sure that cost is covered for the family. So you're just going to drop in, you know, you're going to know whether I'm going to get this all done, I'm going to get a monument out there, I already have my monument there. You're going to drop in $130 for a final date. Everybody needs to put the announcement in the paper, so we're going to do $500 for an obituary in the paper. Now that seems like a lot of money, but newspapers nowadays charge by line, and you know, when you look at an obituary, they might get 2 words on a line. So that's a good allowance in our area because we're a metropolitan area, $500. Sometimes smaller cities are less, they might rent about $200. Then the next thing that we would need is death certificates. They are $18 to $15 each. We recommend 5, and that's $78. Then most folks will get flowers. If you're doing casketed burial, you'll want to have, you know, a casket spray, and that's $250. If you're doing a memorial service, you're still going to put $250 down. Instead of a casket spray, we're going to get 2 floral baskets for you. Okay. Then the clergy honorarium, which includes, for our funeral home, is all the honorariums we need to do for the clergy, for the music, for the sound. Also, if you're going to have military rites, all that's wrapped in one, and that's $400 for all of that. Then opening and closing, it varies by cemetery. Depending on what cemetery you're at, it could be $500, it could be $1,500. This is where, when you meet with your advisor, they're going to be able to tell you exactly how much you're opening and closing. For our sake today, why don't I just have everybody drop in about $600? I think that would work. Okay. Then sales tax is on merchandise. So the casket, the outer barrel container, or vault, depending on what you selected. Anything that we provide merchandise-wise, the memorial package is all taxable at 9.1% for our state, and anything that's starred on your estimate will be need to be taxed, and you can see that it's starred on the estimate sheet. So now, just for you, I want everybody to get all their figures in, and then I'll give you a few minutes to figure that out. For a little bit of a check for yourself, I've done a couple estimates for you, so you can make sure you've got all the figures in there. So I'm this is what I'm going to do. I'm doing a full traditional funeral. My service fee is $4,730. I selected the poplar wood casket at $2,684. It's starred, that means it's taxable. I need the vault at $1,455, and I selected the Monticello. I wanted just the entry vault, and that gives me a true vault. I'm going to do the memorial package at $160, the obituary allowance at $500, the casket spray flowers at $350, the honorarium package at $400, death certificates. I'm going to go ahead and get the recommended 5 at $78. Opening and closing the grave, I'm at Bixby Cemetery, and they only charge $500, not $1,500. Usually the larger cities are the ones that charge the higher amount. And then my sales taxes on all those start items, which those start items totaled $4,299, so my taxes are $391.21. So my total here is $11,248.21. Now, for a traditional casketed burial, that's about the average. Depending, it could be anywhere from $10,500 to that $11,500. That's really almost anywhere you go. That's what you're going to do for a full casketed traditional burial. Now let's take a look at those folks who wanted to have full traditional cremation. That means you're going to have a visitation and viewing. Okay, the package is $5,975. It includes professional service fees. It includes the crematory fee, all permits and documents. You're going to be viewed in a rental casket. Now that sounds odd, but know that no one else will be in where you're laying, because there's a cardboard box in there. The material in that cardboard box goes to the crematory. You're just renting the outside shell, if you will. And we can show you pictures of that when you come in for your personal consultation. Then it includes the temporary urn that's needed, the memorial package, death certificates, the honorarium package because you are doing a service, obituary allowance, and it includes, this is going into a very small local newspaper. That's why we just have $50 down for that. And then casket spray flowers, we're going to get two. They're viewing in a casket, so we need that. That's $350. And then the sales tax on the two start items is $107.38. So that full traditional cremation is $6,960.38. Okay, now the next step that we're going to talk about is on our form, is our last step is how it works when people prepay their funeral or set up a plan to cover those expenses. So step 4 is provide advanced funeral funding. Okay, advanced funeral funding, anytime you prepay a funeral, it goes in an irrevocable funeral trust. And funeral homes cannot hold their own money, so we have to place it with a company. We have chosen to use Homesteaders Life Company. All they do is hold money for funeral homes. And it is a designated pre-funded plan that combines the financial stability of insurance with the security of a trust. And most people know what a trust is. A trust is simply a vehicle to hold money or property, and then that trust will indicate what is to be done with that property or money when a person passes away. And in this case, this money is to be used to pay for your funeral. That is what a trust is. Okay, so how does a funeral trust work? Basically, you pre-plan your funeral, you come up with a dollar amount, and that money is placed in an insurance-based policy. Okay, and I tell people you can find money everywhere. People will say, yeah, I have money to pay for my funeral, but you want to have the proper documents to do what you want to get accomplished. And even with paying for your funeral, you want to have the proper document to hold that money. So you put that money in an irrevocable funeral trust, and that money grows so that at the time of your death, the funeral provider provides all the services on your contract, and they're not going to charge your family any extra on our services and merchandise. And matter of fact, if at the time of your death, the money has grown higher than inflation on the funeral, any excess would be returned to your family. If there's a shortfall, we're going to absorb any shortfall. So it's very, very consumer friendly. Now, also what's important to people is to protect money. And that is so that if you ever need assistance with nursing home or medical expenses, they cannot touch your prepaid funeral money. It's protected from that. It's also protected from creditors. Creditors, can never say, well, they have a $25,000 funeral plan, we're going to take that and then the funeral's not paid for. No, they can't do that. Once you set aside money, that money can never be used for anything but your funeral expenses. It will totally avoid probate, and it qualifies for Medicaid or SSI, like I just talked about a little bit earlier. Okay, now, I love this chart. This is one of my favorite charts. It's because how the funeral trust compares. Because we'll have people that say, well, I have money in annuities, I have saving accounts, I have CDs, I might even have purchased a final expense plan because someone talked me into it, is generally, or I bought it offline. But what you want to get accomplished is to have the right document for what you want to get accomplished, and only an insurance-based irrevocable funeral trust will give you all the yeses, which is proceeds avoid probate. They are federal and income tax free. You never have to pay taxes on the growth on an irrevocable funeral trust. Definitely free from market risk. You never will ever lose the principal that you placed in an irrevocable funeral trust. The principal is guaranteed. There is defined growth rates. Funds are protected from creditors and excluded if you ever need to qualify for medical expenses or nursing home. As you look at all these other means that people might have set aside money for their funeral, they're not getting all yeses. And that's what you want to get accomplished, is to have all the yeses, have the proper documents for what you want to get accomplished. So, advanced funeral funding assures that expenses are not left to others. Protected, non-taxable, irrevocable funeral trust. Medicaid SSI exempt. Transferable nationwide. If you decide to do your funeral planning with our funeral home and then you move, or for some reason you want to use another funeral home, that's your money for your funeral expenses. It's very portable. It goes with you. You choose another funeral home, the funds are transferred and paid to that funeral home. Flexible payment options if you need that. They're paid all at once. You can pay it all at once, or you can select a payment option that will meet your needs. This is where you do definitely have to sit down with our advisors so they can walk you through what options are available. If you are making payments, you're going to have insurance protection during the payment period. That's the beauty of us using a life insurance-based product. We can also provide funeral insurance for those folks who are making payments. Assures funds are protected and immediately available to the funeral home when you pass away, guaranteed against future inflation on our services and merchandise. Funds are placed in an irrevocable funeral trust, like I talked about earlier with Homesteaders Life Company. For the funeral home's protection, because we have to guarantee against inflation, so we have to make sure we're partnered with a very solid company, because we have millions and millions of dollars in prepaid funerals. For the consumer's protection, it's your money for your funeral, and it will never ever be used for anything but that, and it's under your name. It does not belong to the funeral home until they provide the services. Allows you to transfer at any time to any other funeral home. Money cannot be used for any other purpose. Payment terms are available, and this is where you do really, I'm not going to go into detail on this, but if you need payments, we can do 3, 5, 7, and 10 years. You can start a plan and pay it off in 6 months, and then there's no additional fee for the insurance protection. Or you can take a whole year and then you're only going to pay $150 during that year to keep that trust open up and before you get it paid off. So those things are available. So sometimes people have money like I showed you in CDs. You could go ahead and get started, and then when your CD comes due, you can pay it off. So, and it's a very specific plan or insurance if you're making payments for a very specific need. So go back to the very first slides I was showing you where I said you need to have these things, you need to have them done properly and have the proper documents to get done what you want to get accomplished. Same thing with your funeral plan. The only way you can guarantee that it's never going to be a financial burden on your family is to work with the funeral home of your choice and place the money in their document that they are providing for their families. Okay, Some other things that we do have available for families is, and this is here in this particular, on this side that we had for you, we do have like travel plans that are available. If you happen to vacation, then 6 months of the year or 3 months in another place, or you travel a lot, then we can provide travel assurance as available. And also if you have grandchildren that are under the age of 18, we have grandchild protection. And again, the advisor can go in more detail for you on that. Now let's take a look at when you begin to fund, you begin to control costs. Remember, our estimate on a traditional funeral was $11,300. Now, the average, the inflation on a funeral, and they really look at this, the Federal Trade Commissioner, they look at what does services and merchandise inflate to. They've looked at this, the funeral industry, for the past 40 years, and the average is 5%. Some years it's been higher, and some years it's been a little bit lower, but the average is 5%. So let's just use that to calculate out what your funeral plan would do for your family or your estate. If you paid today or set up a plan to cover those expenses, $11,300, and you passed away in 5 years, that plan will cover a $14,422 funeral. If you live for 10 more years, then that plan covers an $18,406 funeral. If you live for 20 years, look what you have actually saved your estate. $29,980. Now, we can look at this, and you can use this however you want. Let's say you decide to do nothing, and you live for 20 years, this is coming out of your estate for your funeral. So, you know, that's why it's so important to get started when you're younger and get a plan in place so you pay today's cost and not tomorrow's. Okay, now we know you guys came on to the webinar, so you're taking the very, very first step in learning about why this is important to take care of for your family and what you need to do. But we know that we're a round to it subject. So this is just a reminder for you to get around to it and make sure that you set that second appointment with your advisor, and they can assist you with the details that they need. They can assist in filling out all that biographical information that we need to do, and they can set up a plan that meets your personal needs for you. Thank you.